All right, welcome back. So I'm gonna speed through this next lesson, just because we don't have much time. We got a lot to learn. This is the third lesson in the U.S. Civil War, and the thing that you got to understand is with the Civil War, you need to understand how it started. And this lesson is all about how the Civil War started. So before we get to battles and stuff like that, we're just going to discuss what was the Civil War about? Why were people fighting? And why were we fighting our own country, our own people? And I was talking to my class yesterday and talking about how it was brother against brother, family against family. People were so divided. Um, this is a map of the United States, and I'm just going to dive right in. Let's go back to the year 1850 when Harriet Tubman escaped from a life of slavery in the South by running away from Pennsylvania to Pennsylvania, a northern state where slavery was not allowed. To divide the North and the South on a map of the United States, it is easiest to use what is known as the Mason-Dixon line. You can see that right here. Boom. The Mason-Dixon line is an imaginary line between the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland. It was named after two Englishmen, Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon, who surveyed this land almost 100 years earlier. The Mason-Dixon line became an imaginary line between the North and the South. Slavery was allowed in the South below the Mason-Dixon line, but slavery was not allowed in the North above the Mason-Dixon line. What were the major differences between the states and the North and the South? Well, slavery was the most obvious difference between the North and the South, but it was not the only difference. Slavery relied almost completely on, the South relied completely on agriculture or farming for its economy. Agriculture is like the science of growing crops, and the economy is a system in which people trade things for money or for other things. The farmland and weather provided the right growing conditions for certain crops and grew well in the South, such as cotton, sugar, and tobacco. Most farms in the South were very small and had few enslaved Africans, or even none at all. But there were also enormous plantations, like the one that where Harriet Tubman was enslaved, where the plantation owners who grew these crops forced hundreds of enslaved Africans to work every day. Under horrible conditions. On these plantations, enslaved Africans worked together, helping each other so their lives would be a little less hard. The crops grown on these plantations were bought by people in the North as far away as Great Britain, and that helped the Southern economy grow. So people all over the world were buying the tobacco, sugar, and cotton. The North had farms too, but they were different from the South. They had wheat and other fruits and vegetables. Some northern farmers also had livestock and cattle, sheep, pigs, but the North did not have the right weather for growing crops that were grown in the South, like cotton, sugar, and tobacco. So people in the North could buy these crops from farmers in the South. So the farmers in the North grew crops mainly for feeding people and animals. And enslaved Africans were not used on those farms. Unlike the Southern economy, which relied on agriculture, the Northern economy was focused on industry and manufacturing. That meant workers were paid to make things in factories, often using machines. Many northern cities were trading centers for iron, coal, and wood. Northern cities had factories for turning iron into steel, a strong metal that would be sent to other factories to make trains, engines, buildings, bridges, tools, weapons, and all sorts of things. The northern cities also had factories for making bottles and jars, furniture, clothing, books, and much more. The factories in the North had access to railroads and shipping ports to distribute their goods that were made there. Because the South wasn't producing a lot of these things in their region, they could buy these goods from the North. People as far away as Great Britain would buy steel from the northern factories, helping the northern economy. Factories were an important part of the northern economy. Thousands and thousands of people were working in the northern factories. These factory workers were not slaves. They were paid for their hard work. and it was true that factory bosses could be harsh. The pay was often pitiful, and the work was difficult, dangerous, and tiring. However, factory workers did have more freedom than slaves, and they had the possibility for a better life. Even though slavery became illegal or against the law in the North, it became illegal before it became illegal in the South. Not everyone in the North was against slavery. Because slavery was such a part of their everyday life, some people in the North didn't really think much about it. A small group of people in the North, however, were absolutely against slavery, no matter what it did for the economy. These people saw slavery as evil. They thought people in Africa should be treated as free human beings. These people saw slavery as cruel and hateful. People who worked to abolish or end slavery became known as abolitionists. This group of abolitionists grew larger and larger over time. By the mid-1800s, there were thousands of abolitionists and enslaved African thousands of abolitionists. Some became furious, like Frederick Douglass, who had been an enslaved African who escaped. Wendell Phillips and Susan B. Anthony. Those three are pictured here, but they are just a few of the thousands of people involved in the abolitionist movement. The abolitionist movement refers to organized activities or events to end slavery. Harriet Tubman was also a famous abolitionist. In addition to being a famous conductor on the Underground Railroad, she not only helped enslaved Africans escape, she also went around talking to people in the North, telling them why it was important to abolish slavery, and explaining what they could do to help enslaved Africans. This image shows abolitionists working on the Underground Railroad. Abolitionists helped to keep the Underground Railroad running smoothly, making sure that as many people as possible were able to escape slavery. Harriet Tubman met and worked alongside famous abolitionists. They printed newspapers with names like Liberator and pressured or convinced political leaders like Abraham Lincoln to see why slavery was wrong. The abolitionist movement became a strong force in America, one that could not be ignored. Abolitionists and enslaved Africans worked together in other ways to rebel against the plantation owners and bring an end to slavery. While many enslaved people were being helped to freedom along the Underground Railroad, others were trying to rebel or fight back against the plantation owners in the South. One such event took place in Virginia, in an area also known as Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. In that event, the abolitionist named John Brown tried to get guns and other weapons to slaves to help them rebel against the plantation owners. In another event, a slave named Nat Turner led a group of slaves to rebel against plantation owners in Virginia. In South Carolina, another formerly enslaved African named Denmark Vesey helped plan a large rebellion against plantation owners in Charleston. Denmark Vesey's plan was discovered before it could be carried out, however. There were also many small acts of rebellion by enslaved Africans against those who enslaved them. Even in these years leading up to the Civil War, there were many violent events in which people lost their lives in the struggle to end slavery. The United States was growing, spreading west and adding new states. As the country expanded west, so did the Mason-Dixon line. By the 1850s, states north of the Mason-Dixon line were free states. In other words, slavery was against the law. In the southern states of the Mason-Dixon line, slavery continued to be legal, and there were more territories to the west that would soon be joining the country. The more the country grew, the more reasons people found to argue over the problem of slavery. As abolitionists fought to end slavery, they also wanted to make sure new territories and new states did not allow slavery. Others, though, did not agree with the abolitionists and felt that new states should be able to decide for themselves whether or not slavery would be legal. By the 1850s, it was clear that the problem of what to do about slavery, whether to end it or to allow it to continue and to spread, was tearing the country apart.